This video will cover how to add a SunBurn terrain to your game. The terrain used by SunBurn is technically a material, and adding a terrain is done through Visual Studio. First, we need to add a terrain material to the content project, then load it in code. Once it has been loaded and submitted to SunBurn, we can use the editor to change its properties. To add a new terrain file, right-click on a content folder in the Solution Explorer and select Add New Item. Choose the SunBurn heading on the left and select SunBurn Terrain. Give the terrain a meaningful name, then add it to your project. Now we need to load the terrain through code. First, open up the game.cs file through the Solution Explorer. This file contains the main C# code for your game, and it is well documented to help you understand its layout. A future video tutorial will cover this code file in more detail. For now, scroll down to the Load Content function shown here. There are several lines of code needed to use a terrain. First, we need to load the terrain file through the content project. This code stores the loaded terrain information into the terrain data variable. Notice that you do not include the file extension when loading content. Next, create a new scene object in code to represent the terrain and store it in the terrain object variable. Then, use this variable to change the scale of the terrain. Finally, submit the scene object to the object manager so SunBurn can render the terrain. Now run your game by pressing F5 and you should see a flat white surface. Currently, the terrain has no height map or textures, so open up the editor to add some details. Switch to the Terrain tab and then select your terrain file. You will see several texture map and numeric properties. As with the Materials tab, you can drag and drop from the texture browser to assign a texture to a property. The first property is the height map property that controls the shape of your terrain. It is a grayscale image where the brightness of a pixel corresponds to height. You can create height maps in an image editing application, or they can be exported for most terrain painting programs. The second property is a blend map that controls which texture to use at each spot on the terrain. The red, green, blue, and alpha channels in the blend map correspond to texture sets 1, 2, 3, and 4, respectively. The more intense a color channel, the more its corresponding texture set will show through. The next four properties control how the terrain is rendered. Height scale controls the actual size of the height map on your terrain. Tiling amount changes how many times the height map repeats, while material scale changes how many times the texture sets repeat. Finally, normal strength changes the intensity of the normal mapping on the terrain. When the editor is open, in-game textures are updated automatically when they are changed from an external application. This is useful as you can update your height map from your image editing application and see the changes immediately. This concludes our video on using SunBurn Terrain. You now have a working terrain in your game and are able to change it in the editor.